Hello and welcome back to the Daily English Lab podcast. Wait, before you roll your eyes at that title, I'm serious. I recently had a student from Brazil tell me something that completely blew my mind. She said her American colleagues suddenly started treating her differently in meetings, not because her grammar got better, not because her accent changed, but because she started using one simple phrase that literally made everyone perceive her as more confident, more natural, and yes, actually younger in how she communicates. Now you're probably thinking, this sounds like clickbait, but stick with me, because what we're talking about today isn't some magic trick or shortcut. It's something so fundamental, yet so overlooked, that once you understand it, you'll literally hear it everywhere. And the crazy part? Most non-native speakers completely avoid it. So the question is, what is this phrase? And how can you start using it today to transform the way you sound in English? Let's dive in. Welcome once again to the Daily English Lab podcast. I'm your English coach, and for the past 10 years, I've been teaching English learners from all around the world. And if you're new here, this channel is all about helping you speak English that sounds natural, confident, and authentic. Now, before we get into today's lesson, I want you to understand why this matters. How you sound in English isn't just about grammar or vocabulary. It's about how people perceive you professionally, socially, and even how confident you feel in conversations. And here's what I've discovered. The biggest gap between learners who sound natural and those who sound, let's say, a bit robotic, comes down to one thing: contractions and casual language patterns. Today, we're breaking down exactly what this one phrase is, why native speakers use it constantly, and most importantly, how you can start using it naturally without sounding forced. Here's what you're going to learn in the next 25 minutes. First, we'll identify the exact phrase and why it makes such a massive difference. Second, we'll explore the psychology behind why native speakers use it so much. Third, we'll look at real-world examples and context where this phrase transforms your English. Fourth, we'll practice using it together. And finally, we'll address the biggest mistakes people make when trying to adopt this pattern. I recommend watching this all the way through, but if you find it helpful, please hit that like button. It genuinely helps the algorithm, and it tells me you're getting value from what we're creating here. Now, before we jump in, I have a question for you. What's the biggest challenge you face when trying to sound more natural in English? Is it confidence? Knowing when to use contractions? Understanding casual expressions? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one, and your answers actually help me create better content. All right, let's get into it. Okay, so I'm going to reveal the phrase, but I want you to really understand what makes it so powerful. The phrase is, "I don't think so." Simple, right? Almost too simple. But here's what's fascinating. When I ask intermediate English learners how they would express disagreement or doubt, they typically say things like, "I don't believe that is correct," or "I disagree with you." Very formal, very textbook. And you know what? It immediately makes you sound like you're reading from a script. But native speakers, they say, "I don't think so." Or variations like, "I don't think that's right," or "I don't think so, but I could be wrong." And this isn't just about this one phrase. This is the gateway to understanding how native speakers actually communicate. They contract their verbs. They soften their statements. They sound conversational instead of declarative. This one phrase opens the door to that entire way of speaking. Why this matters more than you think. Think about what happens when you say something definitively. "No, that is wrong." How does that feel? It sounds harsh, right? It sounds like you're lecturing someone. But when you say, "I don't think so," what happens? You're expressing doubt. You're being diplomatic. You're leaving room for someone to be right and you to be wrong. That's not just politeness. That's intelligence in how you communicate. And here's the psychological piece that blew my mind when I learned it. Research shows that people who use softer language patterns, like "I don't think so," instead of absolute statements, are perceived as more confident, not less confident. Why? Because actual confident people don't feel the need to be aggressive or absolute. They're secure enough to say, "I don't think so, but I could be wrong." Common mistakes people make. Here's what I see all the time. Non-native speakers either avoid disagreement altogether because they don't want to offend, or they go the opposite direction and sound way too formal. They'll say things like, "I respectfully disagree with your assertion," when the situation just calls for a casual, "I don't think so." The mistake isn't the phrase itself. The mistake is not understanding the context where it belongs. You wouldn't say, "I don't think so," to your boss in a formal presentation about quarterly earnings. But in a casual conversation, in a meeting with peers, on a Zoom call with colleagues, that's exactly when this phrase becomes gold. Another mistake I see, people are afraid of contractions. They think it sounds uneducated. So they say, "I do not think so." And it immediately makes them sound formal and wooden. Contractions are not informal or wrong. They're normal, natural English. Native speakers contract constantly. And the moment you do, you sound 10 times more like an actual English speaker. Real-world examples. Let me give you some scenarios where this phrase transforms how you sound. Scenario 1. You're in a team meeting. Your manager suggests a timeline that you think is unrealistic. Non-native speaker approach. "I believe that timeline is not feasible. I must respectfully submit that we need more time." How many people feel tired just reading that? Native speaker approach. "I don't think that timeline is going to work. We'd need at least 2 more weeks." See the difference? Same information, but one sounds like a real person talking. Scenario 2. You're at a dinner party. Someone tells you that pineapple belongs on pizza. Some of you are nodding, some of you are not. Non-native approach. "I must disagree. Pineapple is not an appropriate pizza topping." Native approach. "Nah, I don't think so. Pineapple doesn't really work on pizza, in my opinion." Casual, friendly, human. Scenario 3. A friend says, "Hey, do you think this shirt makes me look tired?" Non-native approach. "No, I do not perceive tiredness in your appearance." Okay, nobody talks like that. Native approach. "No, I don't think so. You look great." See how the contraction and the casual structure just make it sound natural? Here's what I want you to do right now. Pause for a second and think about a recent conversation where you disagreed with someone or expressed doubt. How did you say it? Go ahead and rewrite it in your head using the phrase, "I don't think so," or one of its variations. Really imagine yourself saying it naturally. The goal isn't to force this phrase into every conversation. The goal is to realize that you have permission to use contractions and casual structures. That's your real superpower. Here's how to remember this. Think of the word natural. Most non-native English learners are too formal. They sound like they're reading. The moment you start using contractions and phrases like "I don't think so," you move from reading mode to natural mode. Formal equals robotic. Casual equals human. And humans sound younger and more confident. I had a student once, Marco, from Italy. He was brilliant. His grammar was nearly perfect. But in interviews, he never got past the first round. We started working together, and I realized he was over-explaining everything. Instead of just saying, "I don't think that's the right approach," he'd launch into this detailed analysis of why the approach was flawed. We spent an entire lesson just on learning to say less and sound more confident by being casual and conversational. His next interview? He got the job. The hiring manager told him afterward that he seemed genuinely confident and easy to talk to. That's what changed. So, here's my question. Have you ever felt like your English sounds too formal or stiff, even when your grammar is correct? What situations make you feel that way the most? Drop it in the comments. Understanding native speaker patterns. Okay, so we've identified the phrase. Now let's understand why native speakers use it so obsessively. Think about how you communicate in your native language. You probably use all kinds of casual shortcuts, right? You contract words, you drop words, you use filler phrases. Your speech is full of personality and efficiency. You're not trying to sound intelligent, you're just communicating naturally. Native English speakers do the exact same thing. And here's the secret that textbooks don't teach you. They contract words not because they're lazy, but because it creates a rhythm and a natural flow. When you say, "I don't think so," the contraction makes the phrase smooth. There's no awkward pause between do and not. It flows like water. Compare that to I do not think so. You can actually feel the stiffness. It's like someone's hitting the brakes in the middle of the sentence. Here's where it gets really interesting. There's actual research on this, and it shows that when people hear contractions and casual language patterns, they perceive the speaker as more confident and more knowledgeable. Why? Because when you're nervous or uncertain, you tend to over-explain and over-formalize. But when you're confident, you just say what you mean, simply. You use contractions. You don't add unnecessary words. So this isn't just about sounding young. It's about sounding like someone who knows what they're talking about. It's about sounding like someone who's comfortable in their own skin. And that comes across immediately. The age factor. Now, let's talk about the younger part of our title. Why does using this phrase actually make you sound younger? Older, more formal ways of speaking tend to be more stiff and structured. You hear this in documentaries narrated by older British speakers, right? I do not believe that is correct. Younger, modern speakers sound casual and fluid. I don't think so, man. It's the rhythm, the contractions, the casualness that signals youth and modernity. And here's the thing. It's not that older people don't use these patterns. They absolutely do. But in formal settings, older communication styles tend to be more rigid. Younger people, because they grew up with more casual communication like texting and social media, tend to be looser with their language, in a good way. They're not worried about sounding wrong, they just communicate. One more thing I want you to understand. This phrase is specifically valuable because it softens your stance. In Western business cultures, especially in professional settings, directness can be perceived as aggressive or cold. When you say, I don't think so, you're expressing disagreement without being dismissive. You're saying, this is my perspective, but I acknowledge I could be wrong. This is huge in Western business culture. It signals emotional intelligence. It signals that you're a team player. It signals that you're someone who can collaborate. And all of that comes from one simple phrase. Here's where people get confused. They think using I don't think so makes you sound uncertain or weak. But it's actually the opposite. It's powerful because it shows restraint. It's the difference between someone yelling at you and someone calmly disagreeing with you. Who sounds more in control? The calm person always. According to a study from the University of Massachusetts, people who use more contractions and casual language patterns in professional settings are rated more trustworthy and more competent, not less, more. And that's because it signals that they're comfortable enough with the material and the situation to communicate naturally instead of performing. I want you to try something different right now. Think of a statement you strongly disagree with. Something like, coffee is better than tea, or winter is the best season. Now, instead of directly arguing against it, respond with, I don't think so, and then add just one simple reason. Don't over-explain, don't get formal, just, I don't think so. I'm a tea person. See how that feels? That's native English speaker energy right there. Here's what I want you to remember. Formality equals tension. Casual equals connection. And in human communication, connection always wins, every time. Think about the English speakers you admire most, whether they're YouTubers, podcasters, actors, or people you know in real life. Do they sound formal and stiff, or casual and conversational? Comment below with who comes to mind for you. Now, I don't want you thinking that this is the only phrase that matters. The real power is understanding the pattern. I don't think so is just the gateway. Once you understand this pattern, you can apply it everywhere. Here are the most useful variations that native speakers use constantly. First variation, I don't think that's right. This is slightly different from I don't think so. This one is more specific. You're saying not just that you disagree, but that the specific thing they said isn't accurate. You said the meeting was at 2? I don't think that's right. It's at 2:30. Second variation, I don't know if I agree with that. This one is gold because it's diplomatic. It signals that you're open to their perspective, but you're not convinced. It's a disagreement wrapped in openness. I don't know if I agree with that, but I see your point. Third variation, I wouldn't say that. This one's interesting because it's about how you describe something differently. It's not a head-on disagreement, it's a gentler redirect. I wouldn't say he's lazy. I'd say he's unmotivated right now. See the difference? More nuanced. Fourth variation, I don't think I would have done it that way. This one's past tense and hypothetical. It's useful when you're talking about something someone did, but you're not directly attacking their choice. You're just saying you'd approach it differently. And here's my favorite. I don't know about that. This is the most conversational one. It's very casual, and it works when you're skeptical about what someone is saying. You think you can learn English fluently in 3 weeks? I don't know about that. It's got personality. It's got humor. Native speakers love this pattern. Now, here's the critical part that people miss. All of these variations are great, but context is everything. In formal professional settings, you'd say, I don't think that's the right approach. Here's what I propose instead. In casual Slack message, you'd say, nah, I don't think so. Let's do this instead. In a relationship or close friendship, you might say, I don't know about that, babe. I think you're overreacting. The skeleton of the phrase stays the same, but you add different words around it depending on the context. That's how real English works. It's not about memorizing one phrase. It's about understanding the pattern and then making it fit your specific situation. Let me give you some clear examples of how this changes by context. Professional email. I appreciate your suggestion, but I don't think that timeline is realistic given our current resources. I'd suggest we revisit the timeline with another 2 weeks factored in. Casual Slack message. I don't think so, man. We need more time. 2 weeks minimum. Professional meeting. I hear what you're saying, and I respect your perspective. I don't think we should move forward with this approach. I think we need to explore other options first. Casual conversation with a colleague might sound, I don't know about that. That's not how I'd handle it, but maybe I'm wrong. See the structure? In all cases, you're using the core pattern, but the surrounding language shifts based on how formal or casual the situation is. The trick is to never sound robotic. You want to sound like a real human adapting to the context. One mistake I see constantly, people use the same tone for every situation. They sound equally formal with their best friend as they do with their boss. That's not natural. Native speakers code switch constantly. They're more formal in professional settings and more casual with friends. Another mistake, people add too much formality around the phrase, thinking it makes it better. I must respectfully and humbly express that I don't think so. No, just stop. You're overdoing it. The phrase itself is already diplomatic. Let me tell you a true story. I had a student named Yuki from Japan. She was brilliant technically, but her colleagues thought she was cold and unapproachable. Why? Because she said things like, I disagree, blunt, no softness. She never smiled when she communicated, and she never used contractions. When I taught her to use I don't think so and similar patterns, and to use them with a smile or warmth in her voice, everything changed. People suddenly wanted to work with her more. They said she seemed friendlier and more collaborative. Same competence, different communication style, completely different outcome. Here's something that's just as important as the words themselves. The way you say this phrase completely changes how it's received. If you say, I don't think so, with a dismissive tone, it sounds rude. But if you say it with genuine openness, it sounds collaborative. Your tone and your body language do about 70% of the work. The words do 30%. So when you practice this phrase, don't just practice the words. Practice saying it like you mean it, like you're genuinely interested in the other person's perspective, but you have a different view. Let me give you 3 quick scenarios, and I want you to imagine how you'd respond. Scenario 1. A colleague suggests using a software you've never heard of. How would you respond? Scenario 2. Someone tells you that you should work weekends to get ahead. How would you respond? Scenario 3. Your friend says they're going to quit their job without having another one lined up. How would you respond? For all three, the skeleton could be, "I don't think so," or one of its variations. But the words you add around it and the tone you use should adapt to each situation. Take a moment and think about how you'd naturally say each one. Which of these variations resonates with you the most? Is it, "I don't think so," or "I don't know if I agree with that," or maybe, "I wouldn't say that"? Tell me which one feels most natural to you and when you might use it. Now, I want to zoom out for a moment, because this phrase is really just the tip of a much bigger iceberg. The real game changer isn't just, "I don't think so." It's understanding that contractions are essential to sounding like a native speaker, and most non-native learners are terrified of them. I remember one of my students once told me, "I learned in school that contractions are informal, so I don't use them." And I said, "Okay, but native speakers use them in literally every context, except maybe a formal speech or legal document." Think about that. You learn to avoid the thing that native speakers do constantly. That's a backwards way to learn. Let's talk about how often contractions appear. In casual conversations, contractions appear in about 60 to 70% of the speech. In professional meetings, it's still 40 to 50%. And in formal presentations, it drops to maybe 10 to 20%, but it never goes to zero. Even in the most formal contexts, people still use contractions. They just use them less frequently. Now, there are contractions beyond don't, and some of them are what I call power contractions because they genuinely transform how you sound. Can't instead of cannot. Won't instead of will not. Shouldn't instead of should not. Wouldn't instead of would not. Doesn't instead of does not. Isn't instead of is not. Aren't instead of are not. Haven't instead of have not. Hasn't instead of has not. Wasn't instead of was not. Weren't instead of were not. Hadn't instead of had not. And then there are the softer ones. I'm, your, he's, she's, it's, we're, they're. I've, you've, we've, they've, I'll, you'll, he'll, she'll, it'll, we'll, they'll. These aren't advanced grammar. These are the foundation of how actual English is spoken. And the moment you start using them naturally, you stop sounding like a learner, and you start sounding like a speaker. Let me break down why this is such a huge issue. In most English courses, teachers present contractions as an optional variation. You can say I am or I'm. Both are correct. True, both are grammatically correct, but that's like saying you can eat food with a fork or a stick. Both will feed you, but one is standard. The second reason is fear of being wrong. If a contraction isn't in your conscious knowledge, you might avoid it to be safe. But here's the irony. Avoiding contractions makes you sound more wrong, not less wrong. The third reason is overcorrection. A lot of learners were told at some point that contractions are informal, so they eliminated them completely. It's like someone telling you that smiling in professional settings is informal, so you never smile again. It's an overreaction that hurts you. Here's what's fascinating. When you use contractions, your brain works differently. You're in a more relaxed, natural state. You're not thinking about grammar, you're just communicating. And listeners respond to that. They perceive you as more confident and more competent. When you avoid contractions, you're in a hyper-aware state. You're thinking about every word, you're worried about correctness, and that worry comes through in your speech. You sound stiff, you sound like you're translating from another language. Here's where people go wrong with contractions. They either avoid them completely or they misuse them in weird ways. Mistake 1, over-contracting. Some learners think, okay, contractions are good, so I'll contract everything. So they say things like, I'd have done it, That's not wrong technically, but it's rare. You're overdoing it. Standard contractions are fine. Don't force weird ones. Mistake 2. Using contractions in the wrong context. In a formal written document or a very formal speech, you might minimize contractions. But in conversation, even formal conversation, contractions are totally normal. Mistake 3. Mispronouncing contracted words. Some learners will write don't, but will pronounce it as two separate words, do not. That defeats the purpose. Contractions are about flow, and you have to say them as one smooth sound. Don't. Let me give you a side-by-side example so you can really hear the difference. Version 1. No contractions. I have been thinking about what you said, and I do not think you are right. I believe that we should try a different approach. I would appreciate it if you would consider my suggestion. Version 2. With contractions. I've been thinking about what you said, and I don't think you're right. I believe we should try a different approach. I'd appreciate it if you'd consider my suggestion. Now read them both out loud. The second one flows. It sounds like a real person talking. The first one sounds like you're reading instructions for assembling furniture. Now notice which words changed. Have became I've, do not became don't, you are became your, would became I'd. These are all common, standard contractions that native speakers use without thinking. Here's what I want you to do. Read this paragraph out loud without any contractions. I am going to the store. I will not be back until 6. Do not wait for me. I have already eaten, so you do not need to cook. If you cannot wait, you can order something. I will call you when I am leaving. Now read this version. I'm going to the store. I won't be back until 6. Don't wait for me. I've already eaten, so you don't need to cook. If you can't wait, you can order something. I'll call you when I'm leaving. Which one sounds more like you? Which one would you actually say to someone? That's the power of contractions. Here's what I want you to do. Remember, native speakers contract. Learners don't. So if you want to sound like a native speaker, start contracting. It's that simple. This isn't about being lazy or informal. It's about being normal. How many contractions do you think you use per day in your native language? And how many do you use in English? If there's a big difference, that's your signal to start practicing more contractions. Comment and tell me what you discover when you pay attention to this. Where you'll actually use this. Okay, let's get practical. I'm going to give you real scenarios where this phrase and these contraction patterns genuinely change how you communicate. First scenario, job interviews. This is where I see the biggest transformation. A learner goes in and they're so nervous that every sentence comes out perfectly pronounced and structured. I would like to contribute to this organization. Okay, but nobody talks like that. The interviewer is thinking, is this person nervous or just not authentic? Now imagine the same person says, I'd love to contribute to this organization. I think I could bring a lot of value. Same information, completely different vibe. The interviewer thinks this person is confident and real. Second scenario, networking events. You meet someone new, they ask what you do. Non-authentic response, I am employed in the technology sector. I specialize in software development. Authentic response, I work in tech. I'm a software developer. The first person sounds like they're reading a script. The second person sounds like an actual human. And at a networking event, the human wins. Third scenario, dating or social situations. Someone asks about your hobbies. Formal version, I enjoy physical activity. I participate in running and weight training. Real version, I like to run and work out. I'm pretty into fitness, honestly. The real version has personality. The formal version sounds like a robot talking about maintenance requirements. Fourth scenario, team meetings at work. Your manager asks for your thoughts on a project. Stiff version, I do not believe this approach is optimal. I would recommend an alternative methodology. Natural version, I don't think this approach is going to work. I'd recommend we try this instead. See the pattern? In every single case, the contracted, casual version sounds more confident and more authentic. The power of softening language. Now, I want to talk about something really important. Using this phrase and contractions isn't just about sounding young or native-like. It's about using language strategically to accomplish your goals. In professional settings, especially in Western business culture, directness without softness is often perceived as aggression. If you want people to listen to you, you need to soften your message while keeping it clear. That's what I don't think so does. It disagrees without attacking. There's a concept called face saving. In many Asian cultures, it's explicit. In Western culture, it's more implicit, but it's still there. When you use softening language like this, you're preserving someone's face. You're disagreeing with their idea without disagreeing with them as a person. This is particularly important if you're in a position of leadership or authority. Leaders who command respect are usually not those who are aggressive or absolute. They're those who can express their views while respecting others' perspectives. And that comes through in language like, "I don't think so," versus "you're wrong." I want you to think about English speakers you admire. Could be a YouTuber, a podcaster, a famous speaker, a teacher, anyone. Notice how often they use contractions. Notice how often they use softening language. Notice how they disagree without being dismissive. Spend just 5 minutes watching or listening to someone you consider an excellent communicator in English. Pay attention to their language patterns. I bet you'll hear contractions in nearly every sentence. I bet you'll hear them express disagreement without being harsh. And I bet you'll realize that these are the exact patterns we're talking about. Let me walk through some more real situations and show you exactly how you'd use this. Your boss suggests a meeting at 9 a.m., but you think it should be at 10 a.m. because people are fresher later. Non-native approach, I believe 10 a.m. would be more productive. Studies show that morning meetings before 10 a.m. have reduced efficiency due to circadian rhythms. Native approach, I don't think 9 a.m. will work as well. People are usually fresher at 10. Would that time work for you? Notice the difference? You're saying the same thing, but one sounds academic and one sounds practical. Your colleague tells you that you should work 60 hours a week to get ahead. Non-native approach, I must respectfully disagree. Research indicates that extended work hours lead to decreased productivity and increased health issues. Native approach, I don't know about that, man. I think working smarter is better than working longer. Burnout isn't worth it. Same disagreement, but one sounds like a friend talking to you and one sounds like a textbook. You're in a Zoom call and someone says your idea won't work. Non-native approach, I believe my idea has merit. I would like to present the specific advantages. Native approach, I don't think so. Let me walk you through why this could actually work. Shorter, simpler, more powerful. How to practice this in real time. Here's a practice method that actually works. Pick one situation from your life where you regularly communicate in English. Maybe it's emails to your boss. Maybe it's chat messages with colleagues. Maybe it's video calls with friends. For 1 week, focus on using more contractions and softening language in just that one context. Don't try to overhaul your entire English at once. That's overwhelming. Pick one context, and in that context, pay attention to when you would normally say something formal or absolute and rephrase it with "I don't think so" or similar language. After 1 week, notice how people respond. I bet they'll respond better. They'll seem more engaged. They might even comment that you seem more relaxed or more friendly. Here's something really cool that happens when you start using these patterns. You sound more confident. And as you sound more confident, you actually become more confident. It's a positive feedback loop. Why? Because when people respond to you more positively, you feel better. When you feel better, you relax more. When you relax, you sound more natural. And when you sound more natural, people respond even better. This is why some of my students literally transform within a few weeks. It's not because their grammar got dramatically better. It's because they started using the language they already knew in a more relaxed, natural way. I want to share one more quick story. I had a student named Ahmed from Saudi Arabia. He was a doctor, incredibly intelligent, but when he talked about his research, he sounded like he was giving a presentation to people he didn't trust. Very formal, very guarded. I simply told him, stop explaining so much. Use contractions. Say, I don't think that approach is right, instead of, I believe an alternative methodology would be more advantageous. Within a month, his colleagues started treating him differently. They started asking him for his opinion on things. They started including him in casual conversations. Same doctor, different communication style, completely different social and professional outcome. What's one situation in your life right now where you feel like your English is holding you back? Is it job interviews? Casual conversations? Speaking up in meetings? Tell me in the comments, and I might even create a follow-up video specifically addressing your situation. Mistake number 1. Over-formality with contractions. This is super common. Learners learn about contractions, so they start using them, but they still add formal words around them. They'll say something like, I don't think that your methodology is entirely accurate. You've got the contraction, which is great, but the rest of the sentence is still stiff. The word methodology. Nobody talks like that casually. You'd say, I don't think your approach is right. Same meaning, natural sound. Another example, I wouldn't say that is a proper utilization of resources. Okay, so wouldn't is good, but proper utilization of resources? That's still textbook language. You'd say, I wouldn't use our resources that way. See the difference? You're still using the contraction, but you're simplifying the other words too. The fix. When you use contractions, also simplify your vocabulary. Don't mix contracted language with academic vocabulary. It sounds inconsistent. Mistake number 2. Using I don't think so when you actually disagree strongly. Here's a nuance that matters. I don't think so is diplomatic. It signals that you might be wrong. But what if you're actually quite sure? There's a difference between expressing gentle disagreement and expressing strong disagreement. If someone says the earth is flat, saying, I don't think so, sounds weak. You'd want to say something stronger like, no, that's not right. The earth is definitely round. Or in a professional context, you'd say, I completely disagree. That's not how this works. So the mistake is using this phrase in situations where it makes you sound uncertain when you actually have confidence in your position. The phrase is great for most situations, but not all situations. Know when to use it and when to use stronger language. The fix? Ask yourself, am I genuinely uncertain? Or am I just being polite? If you're uncertain or somewhat unsure, I don't think so is perfect. If you're confident in your position, use stronger language. Match your language to your actual confidence level. Mistake number 3, not matching tone to words. This is subtle but critical. You can say all the right words with all the right contractions, but if your tone is wrong, it doesn't matter. Tone is like 50% of communication. I had a student who said, I don't think so, with this dismissive, cutting tone. It made her sound rude and cold, even though the words were exactly right. The issue wasn't the words, it was her delivery. On the flip side, I've had students who said, I don't think so, with such a soft, uncertain tone that it actually made them sound less confident, not more. The fix. When you practice this phrase, practice not just the words, but the tone. Record yourself. Listen back. Does your tone match what you're trying to communicate? Are you warm but firm? Are you open but clear? Your tone should reflect that you respect the other person, but you also trust your own judgment. Summary of the 3 mistakes. So to recap, don't mix contractions with formal vocabulary. Don't use this phrase when you actually want to express strong disagreement, and don't forget that your tone matters just as much as your words. The good news is, these are all easy to fix. Once you're aware of them, you can start adjusting. All right, let's land this. Here's what we've covered in the last 20 minutes. First, the power phrase, "I don't think so," and its variations are game changers because they're how native speakers actually express disagreement and doubt. They're diplomatic, they're natural, they're authentic. Second, this phrase is just the gateway to understanding contractions, which are essential to sounding like a native speaker. Contractions aren't informal or wrong. They're normal. They're how real English is spoken. Third, the psychology behind why this works is that native speakers perceive casual, contracted language as more confident and more competent, not less. When you sound relaxed and natural, people trust you more. Fourth, context matters. How you use this phrase in a casual conversation is different from how you use it in a professional setting, but the core pattern stays the same. Fifth, real-world application is everything. This isn't theoretical. This is about how you actually communicate in job interviews, meetings, social situations, and everywhere else. Using this phrase transforms how people perceive you. And sixth, the most common mistakes are mixing contractions with formal language, using this phrase when you should use something stronger, and forgetting that tone matters as much as words. Here's your takeaway. You don't need to learn new complex grammar. You don't need to memorize vocabulary lists. You need to use the English you already know in a more relaxed, natural way. Start with, "I don't think so." Start with contractions. Start paying attention to how native speakers actually talk versus how textbooks say they talk. And start practicing in one specific context in your life. I genuinely believe that if you make this one shift, your English will sound noticeably more natural and more confident within 2 weeks. Not because your grammar improved, but because you're now communicating like an actual human being. All right, before you go, I have to ask you to do 3 things. First, if this video helped you, please hit that like button. It genuinely helps the algorithm show this to more English learners who need it. I read every comment, and your feedback shapes what we create next. Second, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We create content every single week about how to speak English that sounds natural, confident, and authentic. And the next video is going to blow your mind. I'm doing a deep dive on the 3 phrases that make you sound like a native speaker when you disagree. It builds on everything we talked about today, and it's actually going to show you how to express disagreement in different situations without ever sounding rude. You do not want to miss that. Third, drop a comment and tell me, what's the biggest breakthrough you had from this video? Or if you're still skeptical that one phrase could really change everything, tell me that too. I want to hear from you. Comment below. And here's what I want you to remember. English fluency isn't about perfection. It's not about using complicated words or complex grammar structures. It's about being able to communicate authentically and naturally. It's about sounding like a real person instead of someone who's reading from a script. The moment you start using "I don't think so," the moment you start contracting your words, the moment you stop worrying so much about being perfect and start focusing on being real, everything changes. People respond to you differently. You feel more confident, and your English actually sounds better. So go out there, use this phrase, start contracting, sound more like yourself, and come back here next week when we dive deeper into how to disagree like a native speaker. Thanks so much for watching. You've got this. I believe in you. Now go practice, and I'll see you in the next one.